Today's very special first keynote presentation comes from the extraordinary Tracey Erin Smith. I have worked with Tracey on making storytelling workshops happen over the last, I think it's been 3 years now. It's a wonderful experience. The feedback I have received from participants is heartwarming, and what I hear most often is that these are life-changing. Now, before I tell you a little bit more about Tracey, she has asked that everyone who's here today grab a piece of paper and something to write with. I'm sure you can use a Word document on your computer, whatever works for you, okay? So while I read Tracey's bio, get that close to you, okay? Tracey is an internationally recognized theater and television creative. She is the founder and driver of Solo Theater, originating in Toronto, with workshops in New York City, Tel Aviv, San Francisco, Vancouver, and the UK. Tracey is an award-winning teacher, solo performer, director, and thought leader, employing personal stories for transformation. Her work has been seen off-Broadway and has been awarded Best of the Fringe for her solo shows The Burning Bush and The Big House, as well as Broadway World Award, the Audience Choice Award, and most recently, she has received the Inspire Lifetime Achievement Award. Tracey is also the host and creator of the award-winning documentary television series Drag Heels, which you can find on OutTV, Amazon Prime, and Apple TV. Tracey is hard at work on her first book, Flying Solo, due out in the fall of 2024, and she loves working with Realize. So with all of that, welcome, Tracey. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Melissa. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada. I am feeling a deep sense of gratitude and humility as we gather for this amazing national summit. It is a privilege to be talking to people who change people's lives. And I'm talking about you. You are human resource managers, workplace leaders, diversity, equity, and inclusion advocates, consultants and academics, and of course, folks living with episodic disabilities. Today, I'm going to share with you my favorite life-saving tool, storytelling. It's November 17th, 2020. We are 9 months into the pandemic, and my partner and I are hiding out in Southwest Nova Scotia in a small town of 6,000 called Yarmouth. Sitting in my office on the top floor of our heritage house, I look out at the deep green trees getting ready for winter, and I wonder, will life ever return to normal? I take a sip of my homemade mocha-colored oat milk latte and check my email. There's a new one in from Melissa Egan, the national lead on episodic disabilities, an organization called Realize. They want to help people living with episodic disabilities build their confidence so they can tell their stories. They are also aware that this may be a vulnerable endeavor, and can I help them? I think to myself, these stories could be very hard to hear, and I write back right away, this is what I do. Let's have a phone call. And so began a 4-year journey of working with people living with episodic disabilities. As most of you know, episodic disabilities occur at irregular intervals and affect individuals' ability to engage and interact with the world around them. Yet amidst these challenges, I've come to understand that the experience of living with an episodic disability is actually a universal one, as we all find ourselves on the spectrum of grappling with something challenging in our lives at various points. In bearing witness to thousands of people's stories over the last 22 years, I have come to see so many of our human experiences are very similar. The uniqueness is found in the details of what happens to us and how we deal with it. There's an expression that I love. It's actually a question that you can ask yourself right now. And that is, how do you uniquely eat at the common table? What has been unique about your life, your choices, your reactions to what happened, and what has been unique about what you have created? Here's one of my answers. It's April 2010, and I'm at home in Toronto, and my sister and I are very worried about our father. Our father, who took us on camping trips and canoe trips, took us to see Neil Diamond, and was completely obsessed with Celine Dion. He's gotten into a lot of debt lately, and it got so bad that his partner, who he adores, moves out of their home and in with her daughter. I can tell he's been quite down lately, and we go out to Starbucks for a breakfast of lattes and egg bites. He tells me his life story. He shares things that I didn't know. And through tears, he says, "It must have been so hard growing up in our house. I wouldn't have wanted to grow up in that house." He has never said anything like that before. A week later, in the middle of the night, I get a call from my sister. She is crying. I ask, "Jessica, what's wrong?" And she says one sentence that changes my life. She tells me that our dad has died, that he ended his own life. The hours and days and weeks that follow are a blur of shock and numbness. But the friends that show up to support me help so much. There's one friend I will never forget. Her name is Claire. Just days after my dad died, Claire, who's a writer, says, "I'm coming over." She arrives at our place and is carrying a large paper bag. She puts it down on the kitchen island and pulls out fresh baked baguettes, 3 kinds of cheeses and meats. Then she pulls her silver laptop out of her bag, sets it on the counter, opens it, looks at me and says, "Tell me about your father." I look at her and my lip starts to quiver as I begin to pace back and forth in the kitchen, sharing with her stories of holding his hand when I was little, but his hands were so big and mine were so small, I could fit my whole hand around one of his fingers. I tell her about the time he took us to see ABBA in concert at the Maple Leaf Gardens and how worried I was about him before he died. And as I share these memories that pour out of my heart that day, my tears run down my face and splash off the white tiled kitchen floor. I tell you this story for 2 reasons. What my friend Claire did for me that day was one of the most profound acts of love I have ever experienced. She asked me to tell her stories about my dad, and she really listened. And those stories Claire captured became the basis for a one-woman show that I wrote and performed about my father's death, which truly helped me heal from my heartbreak by sharing it with others. Sharing our stories with others can help double our joy and lessen our pain by half. We've reached the interactive part of our time together, the reason that Melissa asked you to get the paper and the pen or pencil, or whatever you are able to capture some ideas on. So, as part of my time with you today, I'm going to get you started on the process of sharing your own stories, because I can never resist an opportunity to do this when I have people in front of me. So, on the top of your piece of paper, if you are able, write the words turning points and pivotal moments. I'll say it again, turning points and pivotal moments. Now, bring to mind moments in your life that changed you or that changed the course of your life. I'll give you some examples. Getting married, the loss of a loved one, which is what I shared with you, going to university, receiving a diagnosis, getting divorced or going through a breakup, starting a new job, or getting fired. So you sort of get the point that it's about impactful moments or changes in your own life. So if you can write the numbers 1 to 5 on your page, and as quickly as possible, without thinking about it too much, write 5 of these moments from your own life. My best advice is to just write down whatever comes to mind. There is absolutely no right or wrong way when we're dealing with personal storytelling. I'll give you a moment to do that now. You have about just under a moment left, and however many you can get down is great. Even 1 is fantastic. Okay, great. As far as you got is perfect for now. So I'm going to give you some storytelling tips that I teach people in my Realize classes. The first and one of the best storytelling tips that I can share with you today is to use the present tense. That means when you're telling a story, tell it as if it's happening now. We all know that any story you're going to tell already happened. But the key is in the telling of it, you tell it as if it's happening now. So a simple example would be, instead of saying, I sat and waited for the bus, you would say, I sit and wait for the bus. Studies have shown that storytelling in this way activate what are called mirror cells or mirror neurons in the listener's mind. This really makes them feel as if they're inside the story with you. Another tip is to begin your story with where and when. Where were you when this happened, and when was it? So a time and a location. I know it's something not many people think about, but classically we begin stories with once upon a time in a land far, far away. That's exactly what they're doing. They're telling you when and they're telling you where. So an example of this would be, it's the year 2000, that's the time, and we're in sunny Montreal. There's the place. Or it could be, it's last week and I'm in my kitchen. There's the place and the time. Great. Now, the final tip I'm going to share with you is what I call using rich description when you're telling a story. This is trying to incorporate as many of the senses as you can, and as many as are available to you. So this would be what you saw, heard, smelt, tasted, and touched. This also activates the mirror neurons in people's brains and helps the story come to life in their own mind. Now, you're going to go back to your own pages, and I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to jot down, it can be just in point form, things that you remember about one of those times that you wrote down. So the first thing you're going to do is circle, if you can, the life event that happened that was a pivotal moment for you. And then write down, where were you? When was it? Who was there? And if you can remember anything specific that was said, In my story, I quoted my friend Claire when she said, "Tell me about your father." So if you can think of some dialogue, what was said. Other things to think about is, how did it make you feel, that situation? And what were you thinking at the time? So take a few moments. Point form is perfect. Jotting down different things about that moment that you've chosen. So let's do that now.
Tracey, could you repeat those instructions, please?
Absolutely. So the things that you're thinking about are, where were you when this happened? Who was there? Was it yourself, a loved one, a doctor, an employer, a friend? When was it? What year was it? How old were you? These are two different ways of sharing when it was. What was said? Did someone say something? Usually it's a situation where someone said something to you, or maybe you read something that had an impact on you. What were the words? How did it make you feel? Something to think about. You could use feeling words such as angry, sad, joyful, excited, nervous. You can also use sensations. I felt butterflies in my stomach. Or if you're talking about anger, you could say my jaw got tight. My fists clenched. My thoughts were racing. Let's say you felt anxious. And the other thing you could try to capture is, what were you thinking? Sometimes thoughts in these sorts of situations are along the lines of, what's happening? I can't believe this is happening. Did he really say that? What am I going to do next? I can't believe this. Melissa, feel free to let me know if that was helpful and if there's anything else needed for this part.
Not at the moment. You addressed the question in the Q&A. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'll give at least one more minute here. I'm also happy to send along the text of these instructions for anyone who would like to have them. Great. So I hope you were able to get down one or two things. This is about starting to create a rough draft of that story. But what you just did, if you were able to play along at home, was to put some of the things that happened in that story. And the next step would be to write it out or speak it into a device so that you could start to get a rough draft of that story. And this is exactly what I do with folks in the Realize workshops. In the workshops, the storytelling workshops at Realize, I get to spend 9 hours with each group. And we always have a mix of ages, nationalities, locations across Canada, and lived experience. I have heard so many life-changing stories working with the individuals from Realize. I've heard stories about people with long COVID, living with long COVID while taking care of their children, people living with HIV and AIDS, and how it's been so different throughout the decades. Also, many stories related to living with mental health conditions, including depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. And how I help them look at and then break down their own stories is by breaking it down into stages. And please feel free to think about your own stories as I'm explaining this process. The first stage of every great story is what's called the ordinary world. You can think about one of your pivotal moments from your list and go back in time. So before the divorce, before the death, before the marriage proposal, or as in the case of living with an episodic disability, before the diagnosis. The ordinary world is about the time in your life before the you-know-what hit the fan. This helps your audience know what your life was like before the condition arrived. Every good story starts with, and then one day, which means something different has to happen for it to actually be a story. And in the case of my work with Realize, the something that happens is the episodic disability arrives. There are moments in our lives when time slows down, when what is happening is so shocking that part of us can't actually take in the reality of what's happening. And in those moments, time often slows down. So after the participants describe what their life was like before the episodic disability, they will share what their first symptoms were, and then the moment they received their diagnosis. This is the moment where time often slows down. And this is where I will do a writing exercise with them to help turn the raw material of their own lived experience into something powerful that will really connect with an audience. One technique I use is called personification. This is an amazing technique for creative personal writing. This is where you take an inanimate object in the room where you are, and you give it feelings and thoughts about what's happening in that room. So, for example, when people have chosen to write about the moment they received their diagnosis, one person said, "The second hand on the clock wished it could turn backwards so I would never hear what had just been said." Another wrote, "The chair I was sitting on straightened up under me as if to say, 'I got you. We got this.'" Isn't that amazing? This is the kind of storytelling and art, quite frankly, that some people are making out of their hardships. Similar to the storytelling I did after my father's death. I have seen firsthand how someone with episodic disability learns amazing skills to manage their condition. And guess what? These translate very nicely to help in the workplace. So here's my top 10 list based on my lived experience of working with these amazing folks, based on their skills, insights, and strengths living with their episodic disabilities. This is the top 10 list of what I feel they bring to the workplace. Number 1, resilience. Managing the unpredictability and challenges brought into their lives by episodic disabilities requires resilience. These folks have developed a strong ability to bounce back from setbacks, They adapt to changing circumstances and persevere through difficult times. Number 2, time management. Individuals with episodic disabilities learn to prioritize tasks and manage their time effectively due to their limited energy or symptoms. Number 3, problem-solving skills. Coping with episodic disabilities frequently involves finding practical solutions to a variety of obstacles. Through experience, they develop excellent problem-solving skills, out-of-the-box thinking, and resourcefulness in finding ways to overcome challenges. Number 4, self-awareness and self-advocacy. Managing their episodic disability often necessitates a deep understanding of their own capabilities, limitations, and triggers. This self-awareness enables individuals to effectively communicate their needs, seek reasonable accommodations, and advocate for themselves in the workplace. Number 5, flexibility and adaptability. Episodic disabilities can be, as we know, unpredictable, leading individuals to become flexible and adaptable. Number 6, and this one I have really seen in my storytelling classes, empathy and compassion. Having experienced their own struggles, people with episodic disabilities possess a heightened sense of empathy and compassion towards others facing difficulties. I've seen this in the storytelling workshops and how supportive these folks are of each other. They really cheer each other on. Number 7, innovative thinking. Navigating episodic disabilities often demands innovative approaches to problem solving and finding alternative ways to achieve a goal. Number 8, effective communication. Folks managing these challenges typically develop excellent communication skills, particularly in articulating their needs and managing expectations. Number 9, time and stress management. Living with episodic disabilities often necessitates understanding one's personal limits, managing energy levels, and practicing self-care. And number 10, appreciation for diversity and inclusion. I have seen people with episodic disabilities understand firsthand the importance of inclusivity. They bring truly unique insights into building a more inclusive workplace, promoting acceptance and respect for individuals with various abilities and needs. I have watched people in my groups have deep compassion for others who have very different conditions from themselves. And here's a bonus item. We'll call it number 11. A lot of them are funny as hell. As Nobel Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi said, humor is one of our best ingredients for survival. All of what I have just shared make folks with episodic disabilities super valuable contributors to the workforce, bringing resilience, adaptability, empathy, innovative thinking, and maybe even a few well-placed, hilarious one-liners. And I want to end by telling you what happened with the show I created and performed about my father's life and death. Because it was a show about suicide, I held a talk back every night between myself and the audience. People shared about their own suicidal ideation or about losing someone close to them. This one night, after the talk back, a young woman comes up to me and says, "I'm really worried about my father." And so we talked together and cried together for a few moments. The next night, in the front row of my performance, there was a couple in their 60s. Afterwards, they came up to me and said, "We're here because our daughter told us about your show." And I thought, if one father knew how much he would be missed by me sharing my story, it would have been worth it. And so I invite you, all of you, to seriously think about sharing your stories. Thank you.
Tracey, thank you so much. You and your words make magic wherever you are. It's always just such a pleasure to share space and to hear everything that you have to share with us. So thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to have a look at the Q&A here. There are quite a number of questions here, a few moments, lots and lots of thank yous. Yeah. Let's see what we've got here. George, do you want to give me a hand?
Sure. There's one for Margaret, and Margaret says, "Tracey, I totally agree, and there are positive transferable skills that someone living with an episodic disability brings positivity to an employer. This requires the employer to recognize that their employee has an episodic disability. When the employer says, 'I do not see you as someone with that is disabled,' the employer is not acknowledging the employee and the positive skills the individual can bring to the employer." Any comments, Tracey?
No, I think everything in life begins with acknowledging the reality. And so if they are not acknowledging that reality, it's a really tough place to begin. I really hear that comment.
And just to remind everybody, because I know there was a question in Tracey, they couldn't get your number 10, but you are going to be sharing all of your information, your words of wisdom. And I have taken the course, so I'm going to be one of her students, and I loved it, and I totally am endorsing it on here. So I'm telling everybody to please take the course.
Hi, George. Thank you for your great words. That's wonderful.
All right. Anything else in the Q&A there, George?
Just the last one. Tracey, there's no question, but an inspirational speaker and so insightful and informative. You brought so much to the summit today regarding episodic disabilities, but also for those not dealing with them. Thank you for sharing that you have from Karen.
Well, to the writer of that comment, thank you so much. I can't tell you how working with Realize has changed and enhanced my life. So I am as equally grateful to all of you.
But there is a question. So absolutely amazing. Thank you. I'm the worst storyteller in the world, and I feel more empowered now to share my own story and to inspire others to do the same. My question: how do you start to influence hiring managers to view disability in a different way when storytelling is hard due to distance and location?
Ooh, what do they mean to use civility in a different way? I'm just trying to understand that. Open to anyone jumping in.
To view disability in a different
Disability, thank you. I misheard it. Well, First of all, I really believe the best way to change viewpoints on disability is through personal storytelling, but I am biased. This can be done from a distance. This can, you can record yourself, you can write it. Whatever, if I was passionate about this, which I am, I would try to find a method that gets the stories to these people, because really what changes hearts and minds about a group of people that they may have preconceived notions about is the individual story. That's what humanizes the condition. And also testimonials as to the amazing work people with episodic disabilities have done in the workplace. So you want personal stories and testimonials, proof of the added benefit of working with people with episodic disabilities. I hope that's helpful in some way.
And one last one. Would you mind if I borrow your storytelling techniques with people? I'm an expressive arts therapist, and I loved this presentation. So just put it.
Oh my God. My mission is to change the world with this work. So take it, run with it. That's why I'm writing the book. I want to throw them from rooftops. Start a storytelling circle, help people, help yourselves, bridge souls and hearts to each other through the process of storytelling. It's how we save and change the world.
With that, I think we're at a really good place to say thank you to Tracey. Tracey and I have worked together for 4 years doing this. It's extraordinary, and it's been such a wonderful partnership. She makes me think of a quote that I always have on my wall above my desk, so I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. All right. So what a wonderful keynote. What a wonderful way to start today. Thank you, Tracey. Thank you.
Such an honor. Thank you.
As much of Tracey's resources as possible. And of course, keep an eye out. Fall 2024, the book will come out and we will all have access to that. Okay.